The emergency sirens had been wailing for 3 days straight across every human settlement in the galaxy. Admiral Rebecca Stone watched the holographic display in Earth's primary command center as the last Coalition fleet limped toward their position, ships trailing plasma and debris. The crystalline vessels of the Axiom flickered like dying stars, their once perfect geometries cracked in bleeding energy. The Luminari ships appeared as dim shadows of their former brilliance, their energy beings barely maintaining cohesion within failing containment fields. Even the mighty Mentari dreadnoughts drifted silent and dark, their psychic crews either dead or driven mad by what they had witnessed. How many made it out? Stone asked her communications officer without taking her eyes off the display. Less than 2% of the original Coalition forces, Admiral. Maybe 3,000 ships total from an armada that numbered in the millions. Stone nodded grimly. The Hive Collective had swept through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. World after world had fallen to the insectoid swarm, their biotechnology adapting and evolving with each victory. The Coalition's most advanced civilizations had thrown their best weapons at the Hive only to watch in horror as the aliens absorbed their technology and turned it against them. Energy weapons became useless within days as the Hive creatures developed reflective carapaces. Psychic attacks were reversed and amplified back at their users. Even quantum bombs were somehow contained and redirected. "What's the status of our orbital platforms?" Stone inquired. "All 47 defense stations are operational and fully armed. We've got enough nuclear warheads to glass half the galaxy, and our railgun networks are charged and ready." The other Coalition species had always mocked humanity's stubborn reliance on kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. They called humans primitive for using railguns when plasma cannons existed, barbaric for employing nuclear weapons when antimatter was available. The galactic community had spent centuries trying to convince humanity to abandon their crude arsenal in favor of more elegant solutions. Now those elegant solutions lay scattered across a dozen dead worlds. General Thomas Reed's voice crackled through the CUM system from the surface. "Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of all major population centers. Civilian shelters are sealed and provisioned for 6 months. Military installations are hardened and ready for siege conditions. What about our industrial capacity?" "Still operational. We've converted 70% of our manufacturing to weapons production. The assembly lines are running at maximum capacity, producing ammunition, replacement parts, and basic weapon systems. We're also distributing small arms to every able-bodied civilian." Stone allowed herself a small smile. While other species had centralized their manufacturing in massive, automated facilities that the Hive could target and consume, humanity had deliberately maintained thousands of smaller factories scattered across hundreds of worlds. It was inefficient by galactic standards, but it made them nearly impossible to completely shut down. The first Hive scouts began appearing at the edge of the solar system, their bioships pulsing with alien life. They moved in perfect coordination, each vessel part of a vast collective intelligence that had conquered half the known galaxy. The scouts probed Earth's defenses with energy beams and exotic particles, testing for the usual Coalition weaknesses. "They're scanning our platforms," reported the sensor operator. "Energy signature analysis suggests they're looking for shield generators and plasma conduits." "Let them look," Stone replied. "They won't find what they're expecting." The Hive had developed their tactics through countless battles with energy-based civilizations. Their bioships could absorb directed energy. Their warriors could adapt to exotic radiation, and their collective intelligence could counter any digital warfare attempt. But humanity's orbital platforms were built around principles the Hive had never encountered. Thick metal armor instead of energy shields, kinetic weapons instead of plasma cannons, analog targeting systems instead of digital networks. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Hive vessel," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was a disturbing harmony of thousands of individual alien voices speaking in unison. Human civilization, your resistance is noted but futile. We have absorbed the knowledge and technology of your coalition allies. Surrender now, and your integration into the collective will be swift. Stone keyed the response channel. This is Admiral Rebecca Stone of the Earth Defense Force. Here's our answer. She nodded to her weapons officer, who triggered a full salvo from the nearest orbital platform. 12 tungsten rods, each weighing several tons, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed and slammed into the lead hive bioship. The alien vessel, designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons, simply exploded as the kinetic projectiles punched through its organic hull like bullets through paper. The collective's response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of bioships began emerging from hyperspace, blotting out the stars with their organic bulk. They moved with perfect coordination, forming attack formations that had proven unstoppable against every other civilization they had encountered. All platforms commence bombardment, Stone ordered. Nuclear warheads, full spread, show them what crude weapons can do. Earth's orbital defenses opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the hive fleet while railguns sent streams of metal projectiles into their formations. The aliens had evolved defenses against every form of energy weapon in the galaxy, but they had no experience with simple atomic fusion or chunks of metal moving at extreme velocity. The first wave of nukes detonated among the hive ships, creating massive fireballs that consumed dozens of biovessels in uncontrolled nuclear fury. The aliens' energy absorption capabilities were overwhelmed by the chaotic release of fusion energy. Their perfect formations broke apart as ships desperately tried to avoid the expanding radioactive clouds. Direct hits on at least 200 vessels, reported the weapons officer. The railgun rounds are punching through their formations like they're not even there. But the hive fleet was vast, and they quickly began adapting to humanity's tactics. The bioships started moving in more erratic patterns, making them harder to target. Some began developing thicker armor plating, while others started producing decoy vessels to confuse human targeting systems. They're learning, Stone observed. But they're learning the wrong lessons. The Hive Collective had spent eons perfecting their ability to counter advanced alien technologies. They could adapt to energy weapons, evolve resistance to exotic particles, and even develop immunity to most forms of biological warfare. But their evolutionary algorithms had been designed around the assumption that all spacefaring civilizations would use similar technologies. They had never encountered a species that deliberately chose simple solutions over complex ones. The Hive's bioships could analyze and counter a plasma cannon within minutes, but a nuclear warhead was just controlled fusion explosion with no exotic technology to decode. Their warriors could develop resistance to laser weapons after a few exposures, but a railgun projectile was just a piece of metal moving very fast. Incoming transmission from General Reed, the communications officer announced. Go ahead, General. Admiral, the first Hive landing pods are starting to breach the atmosphere. We count approximately 10,000 drop ships heading for major population centers. My ground forces are ready to receive them. Stone looked at the tactical display showing the approaching biopods. Each one carried hundreds of Hive warriors designed to quickly overwhelm defending forces and begin the process of planetary consumption. They had used the same tactics successfully on thousands of worlds. Understood, General. Give them hell. Roger. That Admiral read out. As the first Hive warriors began landing on Earth's surface, they encountered something their collective intelligence had never processed before. The human cities weren't protected by energy barriers or defended by plasma turrets. Instead, they found concrete bunkers, steel barriers, and soldiers carrying weapons that fired simple chemical projectiles. The Hive had finally met an enemy that fought the way humans had always fought, with determination, adaptability, and an absolute refusal to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. When all hope was lost, humanity had done what it did best. They had locked and loaded. The coffee in Colonel Maria Santos's cup had gone cold hours ago, but she kept sipping it anyway as she watched the tactical displays aboard the battlecruiser Defiance. 3 months had passed since the Hive's initial assault on Earth, and the war had settled into a grinding pattern of attack and counterattack that neither side had expected. The alien collective had assumed humanity would crumble within weeks like every other species they had conquered. Instead, they found themselves locked in the first prolonged conflict in their species' history. "Colonel, we've got multiple Hive bioships approaching from Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Kim from the sensor station. Same formation as yesterday's attack." Santos set down her cup and studied the approaching vessels. The Hive had been probing Earth's defenses with increasing desperation, sending wave after wave of bioships against the orbital platforms. Each attack followed the same pattern. The aliens would test human responses, adapt to whatever weapons were used against them, then return with evolved countermeasures. It had worked perfectly against every coalition species, but humanity kept throwing new surprises at them. "What's their estimated arrival time?" 16 minutes, Colonel." "Signal the Edinburgh and the Moscow. Tell them to prepare for coordinated bombardment using Plan Delta 7. Santos had learned something important during her months of fighting the Hive. Their collective intelligence was both their greatest strength and their most significant weakness. The aliens shared information instantly across their entire fleet, allowing them to coordinate attacks with perfect precision. But this same system meant that when they learned to counter one type of weapon, they expected all human forces to use similar equipment. The human fleet had deliberately maintained diverse loadouts across different ships to exploit this assumption. While the Defiance carried primarily kinetic weapons, the Edinburgh specialized in chemical explosives, and the Moscow had been retrofitted with experimental sonic weapons that used sound waves to disrupt Hive bioship hulls. "Colonel, the bioships are beginning their standard probe pattern," Kim reported, "and they're sending out scout drones to test our defenses." "Let them come. Target the scouts with conventional railgun fire only. Make them think we haven't learned anything new." The Hive scout drones approached cautiously, their organic sensors probing for energy signatures and defensive positions. Santos watched as her gunners fired precise railgun bursts, destroying several drones while allowing others to complete their reconnaissance mission. The surviving scouts would report back to the collective that human defenses remained unchanged. Contact. "The Edinburgh and Moscow. Begin approach vector Charlie 9. Silent running until my signal." The 3 human warships spread out in a loose formation, with the Defiance taking point while the other vessels moved into flanking positions. The Hive bioships responded exactly as Santos had predicted, forming up in their standard attack formation designed to counter the kinetic weapons they expected to face. "All ships in position, Colonel," reported the communications officer. "Signal all vessels, execute Plan Delta 7 now." The Defiance opened fire with its railguns as expected, sending tungsten rods streaking toward the Hive formation. The alien bioships began their practiced evasion maneuvers, confident in their ability to avoid the predictable kinetic bombardment. At the same moment, the Edinburgh launched a spread of chemical warheads designed to release corrosive compounds that ate through organic hulls, while the Moscow fired concentrated sonic pulses that resonated at frequencies specifically chosen to disrupt Hive bioship coordination. The results were spectacular. The bioships, evolved to counter kinetic weapons, had no defense against the chemical attack. Their hulls began dissolving as the corrosive compounds spread across their surfaces. The sonic weapons disrupted their collective communication, causing the formation to break apart in confusion as individual ships lost contact with the Hive mind. "Direct hits on 47 bioships," Kim reported with satisfaction. 15 confirmed kills, with the remainder showing significant damage. Santos nodded, but she knew this victory was temporary. The Hive would analyze the attack, develop countermeasures, and return with new adaptations. The key was to keep changing tactics faster than they could evolve responses. "Signal Earth Command. Request immediate resupply of chemical warheads and sonic weapons. Also, we'll need the new electromagnetic pulse devices from the research division." Down on Earth's surface, the ground war had evolved into something equally unpredictable. The hive warriors that had landed in the major cities were designed to quickly overwhelm defending forces using tactics perfected through thousands of previous conquests. They expected to face energy weapons, force fields, and automated defense systems like every other species used. Instead, they found themselves fighting in urban environments that had been specifically designed for conventional warfare. The human. Cities had physical barriers, underground tunnel networks, and defensive positions that the hive's tactical algorithms couldn't properly process. Their warriors evolved to counter sophisticated alien weapons, struggled against simple human firearms, explosive devices, and improvised weapons. Captain Lisa Wong crouched behind a concrete barrier in downtown New Angeles, watching a squad of hive warriors advance through the rubble-strewn streets. The insectoid aliens were each the size of a small vehicle, with razor-sharp claws and natural armor that could resist most energy weapons. They moved with perfect coordination, sharing information through biochemical signals that allowed them to respond to threats instantly. "Remember, these bugs are used to fighting laser rifles and plasma cannons," Wong told her squad over the radio. "They've never seen a good old-fashioned shotgun loaded with armor-piercing rounds." The hive warriors began their standard assault pattern, spreading out to cover multiple approach angles while advancing under covering fire from their bioweapons. They expected the humans to respond with energy shields and directed energy weapons like every other species they had encountered. Instead, Wong's squad opened fire with a mixture of conventional firearms, explosive grenades, and improvised incendiary devices. The hive warriors' natural armor, evolved to disperse energy attacks, provided little protection against high-velocity metal projectiles and chemical explosives. Several aliens fell immediately, their coordination disrupted by wounds. Their collective intelligence had no experience processing. "Keep moving," Wong shouted as her squad advanced through the urban maze. "Use the tunnels and sewers. Make them chase us through terrain their algorithms can't predict." The battle raged through the underground networks beneath New Angeles, with human forces using every advantage their home territory provided. The hive warriors were designed for open-field combat against conventional armies, not guerrilla warfare in complex urban environments. Their bioweapons were optimized for targeting energy shields and synthetic materials, not concrete walls and steel barriers. In the research facilities scattered across Earth's hidden military installations, human scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons and countermeasures. Dr. Emily Foster led a team that had been studying captured hive technology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. "The key is their biotechnological integration," she explained to her research team. "Every hive organism is connected to their collective network through quantum-entangled neural pathways. Disrupt those pathways and individual units become much less effective." Her team had developed electromagnetic pulse devices tuned to specific frequencies that interfered with hive neural communication. The weapons didn't destroy the aliens directly, but they isolated individual units from the collective intelligence that coordinated their actions. "We've also discovered that their bioships have difficulty processing chaotic energy signatures," added Dr. Robert Chun, Foster's deputy. "They can adapt to any organized energy pattern, but completely random electromagnetic noise seems to overload their sensory systems." The human military began deploying these new weapons alongside their conventional arsenal, creating an increasingly unpredictable battlefield that the hive collective struggled to understand. Every time the aliens developed countermeasures to one human tactic, they discovered that the humans had already moved on to something else. The pattern of warfare that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The hive, with their perfect collective intelligence and evolutionary adaptability, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to follow predictable patterns. Human forces changed tactics constantly, mixed conventional and experimental weapons randomly, and used terrain and circumstances in ways that defied the aliens' strategic models. As reports came in from battlefronts across the solar system, startling truth began to emerge. For the first time in their species' history, the Hive Collective was being forced to retreat from multiple engagements. Their supposedly unstoppable advance had ground to a halt against an enemy that fought with chaotic determination rather than organized precision. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven something important. They could not only survive the Hive's initial assault, but could force the collective to adapt to human methods rather than the other way around. The galaxy's most primitive species had become its most dangerous defenders. Engineer Captain David Park wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the massive factory floor that had once produced civilian hover cars but now churned out armored personnel carriers around the clock. 6 months into the war with the Hive Collective, humanity's industrial machine had transformed itself into something the galaxy had never witnessed before. A species-wide weapons manufacturing operation that turned every factory, workshop, and garage into a producer of military equipment. "How many units did we complete yesterday?" he asked his production supervisor, Helen Moore, as they walked between the assembly lines where thousands of workers labored in shifts that never stopped. 247 APCs, plus spare parts for another 100 vehicles already. "In the field," Moore replied, consulting her tablet. "The night shift also finished converting 3 more civilian production lines to military specifications. By next week, we should be able to add another 50 units per day to our output." Park nodded with satisfaction. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. When the Hive first attacked, humanity had possessed a modest military-industrial complex suitable for maintaining peace and defending against conventional threats. But the existential crisis had awakened something primal in human nature. The ability to turn every resource toward survival when facing extinction, unlike other species that centralized their manufacturing in massive automated facilities. Humans had maintained thousands of smaller factories across hundreds of worlds. The galactic community had criticized this approach as inefficient and wasteful, preferring the elegant precision of completely automated production centers. Now that distributed network was proving impossible for the Hive to completely destroy. "What's the status on the electromagnetic pulse weapon production?" Park inquired as they reached the electronics section of the facility. "We've converted 4 consumer electronics plants to EMP device manufacturing," Moore explained. "The components are actually simpler than the entertainment systems we were making before. We're producing about 50 units per day, with plans to double that once the new equipment arrives from the Detroit facilities." The Hive Collective had evolved their tactics through conquering advanced civilizations that relied on sophisticated but centralized production systems. Destroy a few key facilities, and entire planetary defense networks would collapse from lack of spare parts and replacement equipment. The aliens had never encountered a species that could turn toy factories into weapons plants and civilian repair shops into military supply depots across the factory floor. Former automotive engineers worked alongside electronics technicians and chemical plant operators to solve production challenges that no single industry could have handled alone. The hover car assembly line provided the chassis and propulsion systems. The electronics division added targeting computers and communication equipment, and the chemical section manufactured the explosive rounds and fuel systems. Captain Park, "We've got visitors from the Lunar Mining Consortium," announced Lieutenant Torres from the facility's communication center. "They want to discuss converting their asteroid processing equipment to weapons manufacturing." Park smiled. The mining companies had been among the first civilian industries to volunteer for military conversion. Their equipment was already designed to break apart large objects and process raw materials, skills that translated perfectly to munitions manufacturing and weapons testing. "Send them to Conference Room 3. I'll meet them there in 10 minutes. As Park made his way through the facility, he passed workshops where teams of workers assembled. Weapons that would have seemed primitive to other galactic civilizations but were proving devastatingly effective. Against the Hive, chemical explosive devices that could be manufactured in any industrial facility. Kinetic projectile weapons that required only basic metallurgy and mechanical engineering. Electronic warfare systems built from consumer electronics? Components. The lunar mining representatives were waiting in the conference room when Park arrived. Led by operations manager Jennifer Walsh, the group included engineers, heavy equipment operators, and logistics specialists who had spent years perfecting the art of large-scale resource extraction and processing. Captain, we've been following the war reports, and we think our mining equipment could be adapted for military use, Walsh began without preamble. Our asteroid processing plants can manufacture tungsten projectiles for your railgun systems, and our drilling equipment could be modified to create kinetic bombardment weapons. Park studied the proposals they had brought. The mining consortium controlled dozens of facilities throughout the solar system, each one equipped with massive industrial equipment designed to process raw materials on an unprecedented scale. What kind of production capacity are we talking about? We could produce enough tungsten rods to supply every railgun platform in the fleet, Walsh replied. Our current capacity is designed for mining operations, but we could easily scale up to military requirements. We're also proposing to convert some of our larger drilling platforms into orbital bombardment systems. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. The mining companies already possess the equipment and expertise needed to manufacture kinetic weapons on an industrial scale. Their drilling platforms, designed to bore through asteroids, could be converted into weapons that dropped massive projectiles from orbit with devastating precision. What do you need from us? Technical specifications for the weapon systems and coordination with your logistics network. We can handle the manufacturing and initial deployment, but we'll need military oversight to ensure the weapons meet battlefield requirements. Park approved the proposal immediately. Within hours, mining facilities throughout the solar system began converting their operations to military production. Asteroid processing plants started manufacturing ammunition for human weapon systems. Deep space drilling platforms were retrofitted with guidance systems and turned into orbital bombardment weapons. Even the massive solar collectors used to power mining operations were modified to serve as energy sources for the growing network of defensive installations. The transformation wasn't limited to major industrial facilities. In workshops and garages across human space, individual craftsmen and small businesses contributed to the war effort in ways that amazed even their own species. Motorcycle mechanics modified their engines for military vehicles. Electronics hobbyists built communication devices and sensor arrays. Even artists and sculptors found ways to contribute, creating camouflage patterns and designing equipment that served both functional and psychological purposes. Lieutenant Commander Anna Wright observed this industrial mobilization from her position as liaison between military research and civilian manufacturing. Her job involved coordinating between the scientists developing new weapons and the factories that would produce them, ensuring that theoretical concepts could be turned into practical battlefield equipment. The remarkable thing isn't just the scale of production, she reported to military headquarters. It's the speed of innovation. Civilian engineers are coming up with improvements and modifications faster than our research teams can evaluate them. A perfect example was the enhanced explosive devices being developed by former mining engineers. The original military specifications called for conventional chemical explosives, but the civilian contractors had experimented with mining compounds and discovered combinations that were far more effective against hive bioships. Their innovations were being incorporated into production within days rather than the months typical of military development cycles. The Hive Collective's response to humanity's industrial mobilization revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of human warfare. The aliens increased their attacks on major population centers, expecting to cripple human production by destroying key facilities. Instead, they discovered that eliminating one factory only caused 3 more to spring up in different locations. The distributed nature of human industry meant that weapons production actually increased as more facilities converted to military manufacturing. Small workshops that had never produced anything more dangerous than kitchen appliances began turning out ammunition and spare parts. Research universities converted their laboratories to weapons development. Even entertainment companies found ways to contribute, using their special effects expertise to develop camouflage and deception technologies. The Hive is learning the wrong lessons again, Wright observed during a strategy meeting with military leaders. They keep trying to shut down our production by targeting what they think are key facilities, but they don't understand that we don't have key facilities. We have thousands of facilities, and each one can be replaced or relocated within days. The psychological impact on human society was as significant as the industrial transformation. The species that had been dismissed as primitive by the galactic community was proving that their approach to manufacturing and logistics was not only viable but superior under wartime conditions. Every human civilian became a potential contributor to the war effort, creating a level of social mobilization that the Hive's collective intelligence couldn't comprehend. By the end of the 6th month, humanity was producing more military equipment than they had manufactured consumer goods before the war began. The industrial capacity that had once been criticized as inefficient and wasteful had become the foundation of the most successful resistance the galaxy had ever mounted against the Hive Collective. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that grew stronger with each passing day, whose production capacities seemed to multiply rather than diminish under attack. For a species that had conquered civilizations by disrupting their technological infrastructure, humanity represented an entirely new type of challenge, an opponent whose strength came not from advanced technology but from the simple ability to make more weapons faster than they could be destroyed. Major General Patricia Hayes crouched in the observation bunker overlooking the battlefield on Europa, Jupiter's fourth moon, watching as the liberation operation unfolded below. 9 months had passed since the Hive Collective began their assault on humanity, and this marked the first major counteroffensive launched by human forces. The icy surface of Europa was scarred with the organic structures the Hive had grown during their occupation, but those alien growths were now burning under sustained human bombardment. General, the 3rd Armored Division has broken through the outer perimeter, reported Colonel Williams over the radio. Hive resistance is lighter than expected. They seem confused by our approach patterns. Hayes smiled grimly as she watched human tanks advance across the frozen landscape. The vehicles looked primitive compared to the elegant hover tanks used by other galactic civilizations, but their tracked propulsion systems and heavy armor were proving perfectly suited for the chaotic battlefield conditions that characterized human warfare. Maintain the advance. Signal the artillery to begin targeting the secondary defensive positions, and remind all units to keep their communication protocols randomized. We don't want the Hive adapting to our coordination patterns. The liberation of Europa represented everything humanity had learned about fighting the collective. The Hive's evolutionary adaptations, perfected through conquering hundreds of advanced civilizations, had created blind spots that human tactics could exploit. The aliens expected sophisticated energy weapons, predictable attack patterns, and centralized command structures. Instead, they faced an enemy that deliberately chose chaos over precision. Human forces had spent months studying Hive defensive tactics, and they had discovered a crucial weakness in the alien collective intelligence. The Hive could instantly share information across their entire network, allowing them to coordinate responses with perfect efficiency. But this same system made them vulnerable to opponents who used deliberately unpredictable strategies. General, we're receiving reports from the assault teams penetrating the Hive biostructures, Williams continued. The aliens seem to be having difficulty coordinating their defense. Individual warrior units are responding to our attacks, but they're not receiving effective support from other sectors. Hayes nodded. Human military doctrine had evolved during the months of warfare to take advantage of this weakness. Instead of the organized, predictable tactics that other species preferred, human forces used what their commanders had termed controlled chaos, deliberate randomization of attack patterns, communication frequencies, and tactical approaches that kept the Hive collective intelligence off balance. The armored vehicles advancing across Europa's surface exemplified this philosophy. Rather than maintaining perfect formations, human tank crews deliberately varied their spacing, speed, and approach angles. Their communication systems randomly switched between different frequencies and encryption protocols. Even their weapons. Fire followed unpredictable patterns designed to prevent the hive from developing effective countermeasures. Signal the Marine units to begin the assault on the central biocomplex, Hayes ordered. Remind them to use the new chemical weapons. Sparingly, we want to save the surprise for when the hive tries to adapt. Human scientists had discovered that the hive's biotechnological nature made them vulnerable to certain chemical compounds that were harmless to humans but devastating to alien organic systems. However, the military had learned to use these weapons strategically, revealing new capabilities only when necessary to prevent the hive from developing immunity too quickly. The Marine assault teams moved through the alien biocomplex using tactics that would have seemed chaotic to observers from other civilizations. Instead of advancing in organized formations, the human soldiers moved in small, independent groups that coordinated through brief radio bursts and hand signals. Their approach routes varied constantly, and they deliberately created noise and confusion to mask their actual objectives inside the biocomplex. Hive warriors found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The human Marines used a combination of conventional firearms, explosive devices, and improvised weapons that defied the aliens' tactical algorithms. Chemical weapons appeared without warning, followed by kinetic attacks from unexpected directions. Then electronic warfare devices that disrupted hive communication networks. Contact. Multiple hive warriors in Section 7, came the radio call from Sergeant Martinez's squad. Engaging with standard protocols. Hayes listened as the battle reports came in from throughout the complex. The human soldiers were using what they called standard protocols, but these were anything but standard by galactic military practices. Each squad carried different weapon combinations, used unique tactical approaches, and maintained operational independence that allowed them to adapt to local conditions without waiting for orders from higher command. The Hive Warriors evolved to counter the organized military doctrines of advanced civilizations, struggled to process the human approach. Their collective intelligence could analyze and counter any predictable pattern, but the deliberate randomization of human tactics prevented them from developing effective responses. General, we've secured the primary biostructure, Williams reported. Hive resistance collapsed once we disrupted their communication nodes with the new electromagnetic devices. Individual warriors fought fiercely, but they lost coordination once they were cut off from the collective. This was another crucial discovery human forces had made during months of warfare. The Hive's greatest strength, their instantaneous communication and collective decision-making, became a critical weakness when disrupted. Individual Hive warriors were formidable opponents, but they relied heavily on guidance from the collective intelligence to coordinate their actions effectively. Human engineers had developed electromagnetic pulse weapons specifically designed to interfere with Hive biocommunication systems. These devices didn't destroy the aliens directly, but they isolated individual units from their collective network, turning coordinated formations into confused individuals struggling to adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. Excellent work, Colonel. Signal all units to begin the occupation phase and activate the orbital bombardment beacons. We want to be ready if the Hive tries to retake this position. The liberation of Europa marked a turning point in humanity's understanding of their own military capabilities. For months, they had been fighting defensively, learning Hive tactics while protecting Earth and the other core human worlds. Now, they were proving that human forces could not only resist the collective, but could actively defeat them in direct confrontation. The key was the human approach to warfare itself. While other galactic civilizations had developed elegant, efficient military doctrines based on advanced technology and perfect coordination, humanity had maintained a chaotic, adaptable style of combat that emphasized individual initiative and tactical flexibility over centralized control. Human soldiers were trained to function independently when communication was disrupted. to improvise weapons and tactics when standard equipment failed, and to use terrain and circumstances in ways that formal military doctrine couldn't predict. These skills, developed through centuries of fighting other humans in every conceivable environment, proved perfectly suited for battling an enemy that relied on predicting and countering organized military responses. "General, we're receiving reports from other battlefronts," announced the communications officer. "The liberation of Titan was completed 6 hours ago, and the assault on the hive positions in the asteroid belt is proceeding ahead of schedule." Hayes reviewed the tactical displays showing human operations throughout the solar system. Each battle followed similar patterns, human forces using unpredictable tactics to disrupt hive coordination, followed by decisive attacks that exploited the aliens' inability to adapt to chaotic battlefield conditions. The psychological impact on the Hive Collective was becoming apparent in their changing behavior patterns. Intelligence reports indicated that the aliens were becoming increasingly cautious, hesitating before committing forces to battles they weren't sure they could win. For a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds through overwhelming confidence in their adaptive capabilities, uncertainty was a crippling weakness. "Signal Earth Command," Hayes ordered. "Inform them that Europa is secure and ready to serve as a forward operating base for the next phase of operations. Also, request priority delivery of the new kinetic bombardment weapons. I want to test them against Hive bioships before they develop countermeasures." The human war machine was hitting its stride, combining industrial production with tactical innovation to create an increasingly effective fighting force. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was proving that sometimes the simplest approaches were the most difficult to counter. As Hayes watched the final hive biostructures burning on Europa's frozen surface, she reflected on how completely the war had changed both humanity and their enemy. The collective had expected to face another advanced civilization that would follow predictable patterns and eventually surrender when their sophisticated defenses were overcome. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that treated war not as a chess game with defined rules, but as a chaotic struggle where anything that worked was acceptable and adaptation was more important than elegance. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, flagship of humanity's newly formed extermination fleet, as it approached the massive hive biostation that served as the aliens' primary staging area in this sector of the galaxy. 12 months had passed since the collective's initial invasion of Earth, and the war had transformed from a desperate defense into a systematic campaign of destruction that was sending shockwaves throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, we're detecting massive bioship formations around the station," reported Commander Jackson from the sensor station. "Intelligence estimates indicate this is their largest remaining concentration of forces in local space." Stone studied the tactical display showing the alien biostation and its defenders. The structure was enormous, a living mass of organic technology that pulsed with alien life and stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Bioships swarmed around it like insects protecting their hive, but Stone could see the signs of desperation in their formations. The perfect coordination that had once characterized hive movements was gone, replaced by the frantic positioning of an enemy that no longer understood the rules of engagement. "Signal the fleet. All ships assume attack formation Delta 9. Nuclear bombardment ships take priority positions. Kinetic weapons platforms prepare for sustained fire." The human fleet that surrounded the biostation represented everything humanity had learned during 12 months of total war. Unlike the elegant vessels preferred by other galactic civilizations, human warships were brutal, utilitarian designs built around the simple principle of delivering maximum destructive force with minimum complexity. Their hulls were thick metal, armor rather than energy shields. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads rather than exotic energy beams. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender overtures from the biostation," Jackson reported with surprise. "The Hive Collective is offering to withdraw from this sector in exchange for safe passage." Stone's expression hardened. The Hive Collective had spent centuries conquering and consuming entire civilizations, absorbing their knowledge and leaving nothing but dead worlds in their wake. They had never offered surrender before because no species had ever forced them into a position where retreat was necessary. Signal response, surrender terms rejected. All Hive forces in this system will be destroyed. The alien collective had made a fundamental miscalculation when they invaded human space. They had expected to face another advanced civilization that would follow the established patterns of galactic warfare, organized resistance followed by negotiated surrender when defeat became inevitable. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that viewed the conflict in absolute terms and refused to accept any outcome other than complete victory. Nuclear bombardment ships commence firing. Full spread maximum yield. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that the galactic community had abandoned as crude and barbaric centuries ago. Nuclear warheads streaked toward the biostation, while kinetic projectiles followed behind them. The Hive's defensive systems, evolved through countless battles with energy-based civilizations, proved inadequate against the chaotic destruction of uncontrolled fusion reactions in chunks of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. The biostation's organic hull began dissolving under the nuclear bombardment as radiation tore through its living tissue. The kinetic projectiles punched through structural supports and critical systems, causing massive sections of the station to break away and drift into space. The defending bioships tried to intercept the human weapons but found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming ordnance. Direct hits on 60% of the station's surface, Jackson reported. We're detecting massive internal explosions as their organic systems fail. Stone nodded with satisfaction. The Hive had evolved their biotechnology to be resistant to directed energy weapons and exotic particles, but living tissue could not withstand nuclear fire and kinetic trauma any better than conventional matter. Their greatest advantage, the ability to adapt and evolve, became irrelevant when facing weapons that simply destroyed everything in their path through brute force. Signal General Reed on the surface assault ships. Begin ground operations. While the fleet continued its bombardment of the biostation's exterior, human marine forces launched their assault on the structure's interior. The soldiers moved through the organic corridors with confidence born of a year's experience fighting the Hive in every conceivable environment. Their weapons were a mixture of conventional firearms, chemical weapons, and explosive devices that had proven effective against alien biotechnology. The Hive warriors defending the station fought with desperate courage, but they were facing an enemy that had spent 12 months learning how to kill them efficiently. Human soldiers used sonic weapons to disrupt Hive communication, chemical compounds to dissolve their natural armor, and simple explosive devices to destroy their biomechanical systems. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the assault teams, the communications officer announced. They've located what appears to be a Hive queen form in the central section of the station. Stone's eyes lit up with interest. Intelligence reports had suggested that the Hive used massive queen organisms to coordinate their collective activities. Destroying one would seriously disrupt their operations throughout the local region. Signal the orbital bombardment platforms. Prepare converted. Asteroid mining charges for precision strike on the central section. The mining companies that had joined humanity's war effort had contributed more than industrial capacity. They had provided weapons that no military engineer would have considered building. Asteroid mining charges were designed to split apart massive chunks of rock and metal, but they worked equally well against organic biostations. The massive explosive devices descended from orbit with devastating precision, guided by targeting systems that combined human engineering with alien refugee technology. The queen form, evolved to survive energy attacks and biological warfare, had no defense against the simple application of overwhelming explosive force. The detonation tore through the biostation's central core, causing massive structural failures that spread throughout the organic network. The Queen's death throes sent shock waves through the Hive Collective. disrupting coordination among defending forces and causing panic among bioships that had never experienced the loss of a coordinating intelligence. "The biostation is breaking apart," Jackson reported. "Massive structural failure across all sections. The remaining hive forces are attempting to evacuate. Signal all ships. Pursue and destroy. No survivors, no escape pods, no mercy." The human fleet spread out to intercept the fleeing bioships, using tactics that had been perfected through months of hunting hive forces throughout human space. The aliens' attempts at organized retreat collapsed as human vessels used unpredictable attack patterns and mixed weapon systems to prevent effective countermeasures. Some bioships tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas for mercy in languages borrowed from the civilizations they had consumed. Others attempted to flee into hyperspace, only to discover that human forces had learned to predict their escape routes and position intercepting vessels accordingly. "Admiral, we're detecting hive bioships attempting to escape toward the outer system," reported the tactical officer. "Signal the pursuit squadrons. Hunt them down, every last one." The systematic destruction of the hive biostation marked the beginning of the final phase of humanity's campaign against the collective. What had started as a desperate defense of Earth had evolved into a galaxy-wide extermination effort that showed no signs of slowing down. The surviving alien refugees who had once sought shelter in human space watched in amazement as the species they had dismissed as primitive systematically dismantled an enemy that had conquered half the known galaxy. The crystalline axiom provided advanced materials for human weapons. The energy-based luminary offered power sources for railgun systems. The psychic Mentari used their abilities to coordinate human tactical operations, but it remained humanity's approach to warfare, direct, brutal, and utterly uncompromising, that drove the offensive forward. Other species fought wars with elegant precision and negotiated endings. Humans fought wars with the intent of completely destroying their enemies, using whatever weapons worked most effectively regardless of how crude they might appear to outside observers. As the last hive bioship exploded under human fire, Stone issued the orders that would echo throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Signal all fleet commanders. Begin systematic sweep of remaining hive territories. Destroy every bioship. Eliminate every warrior, burn every installation. We will not stop until every trace of the collective has been erased from the galaxy. The hive had awakened something primal in humanity when they threatened Earth. The absolute determination to survive at any cost and the willingness to use any level of violence necessary to ensure that survival. They had expected to face another civilized species that would eventually accept defeat when the costs became too high. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous, a species that viewed existential threats as opportunities to demonstrate that when all hope was lost, humans didn't surrender, negotiate, or compromise. They locked and loaded, and they kept fighting until nothing remained of their enemies but radioactive debris drifting through empty space. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species that preferred simple solutions to elegant ones, and that treated warfare not as a diplomatic tool but as a means of permanent problem-solving.